Hi, it's George Nordhaus, and I've got a different perspective for you today. Something that's going to be very enjoyable. It's something that nobody has ever done before, to my knowledge, and we're going to give you the British perspective on insurance commoditization. That's where this darn business started anyway, and that's a whole other story. My presenter is Barrie Wells. Now, let me tell you about Barrie. I've known him for many years. He was born and raised in the UK. He's a lifetime financial services entrepreneur, as you can see. And he's owned a number of insurance operations. He is the one who developed the quote-unquote Geico of Britain. Wait till you hear this story. It's unbelievable. And anyway, he started something called Prospero Direct, and we'll tell you about that. And then Premier Line Direct, and you'll see that, the UK's first small commercial and commercial auto operation. He sold that to Allianz. He sold the first one to AXA Direct. How was that? Barrie was also with Marks and Spencer as a non-executive director. Very impressive. He's spoken all over the world practically. He spoke for me a lot early days. When he sold having sold Premier Direct, his second program, he decided to go into philanthropy and founded the Wells Sports Foundation. That's a phenomenal organization. What you see there on the screen is British athletes for the Olympics. He sponsored them. He helped. He paid so they could be able to train. Let me show you the one person that. How good was it? Let me show you the next one. Look at this. This was Jessica Ennis, and she won the heptathlon gold, which is, the outstanding woman athlete in the world. What do you think about that? He sponsored all that. That was a great story, and I let him tell you a little bit more about that. In return, they give 6 half days back to the foundation, and it's just a beautiful thing that they're doing for these kids to participate in sports. This is what Barrie's doing with his career. He set up something called Box for Kids, and this is an unbelievable program which enables well, Barrie, you tell about it.
Well, Box for Kids, just going back a bit, George, going back to my trip to, Box for Kids in particular, and it's interesting that you also struggle with the word philanthropy.
Yes, I do.
I noticed that at this time of the morning in Texas, I know it's quite hard.
I'm not in Texas, I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Santa Fe?
Yeah.
Well, I know, New Mexico. Okay, I'm only one state out, George. I'm only one state out. Basically, I'd made this amount of money. I'd made quite a lot of amount of money, and I then decided what I would do is I would give it away to charities. The main charity is my own Wells Sports Foundation, which basically sponsored 18 elite athletes who all went to the schools, as George mentions. But Box for Kids is the big initiative now, and this is VIP boxes. It's like in America, I thought USA, if you had it at basketball, baseball, football, again, it would be fantastic. And it's giving disabled, terminally ill kids a fantastic experience.
That's a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. How'd you get started on this whole deal?
Well, it really all started when I went to America in the 1970s. What I'd done is I won a scholarship, and the scholarship let me go anywhere in the world I wanted to for up to a year studying insurance marketing. And I thought, well, the USA was the market leaders. So I decided what I would do as go to the United States. So I took the United States press, the insurance press, for the best part of 6 months. I found out the names of what were the controversial issues about the best insurance agents, exclusive agents, direct writers, the carriers, etc. And I created this complete program. And in fact, traveled 17,000 miles by road around the United States, visiting most states. In fact, the only place I think I didn't go to was Nome in Alaska. Otherwise, I went all over from Wausau, Wisconsin, Vaughan, New Mexico, you name it, George. I actually went there. Again, I went to 30 head offices and spent the best part of a week with each one.
Wow.
And if you look at those companies, George, they all are market leaders at the time. But they were just fantastic on both sides of the country. But also, what I was into when I read the McKinsey report, I was really interested to read this thing about the duplication of issues between the carriers and the agents, because this thing has been going on, to the best of my knowledge, for 40 years. I can remember going to Safeco in Seattle, again in the 1970s, talking to a guy called Dick Stevick, who was the VP marketing of Safeco, and he was telling me, in fact, what they'd done is create a program a direct collection, direct billing program, which took out the costs on the accountancy side. And he was saying, why would we pay for accounts costs, and why would the independent agent? Let's work out a single billing system. Now that, George, was over 40 years ago. So the issue had raised itself as long ago as that.
And you went to, you came to my office. I was running the Big I Association in Indiana at that time, and you came over there. That's where we met, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, that's where we met, and at that time, George, you were just a mere child. I think when we met, you were 37 years old, and I think what amused me is you were very interested in your European background, and I remember you wearing lederhosen socially sometimes, and that wasn't a nice. That wasn't a nice sight, George. That wasn't a nice sight.
Oh God!
But,
only you would say that. Yeah.
But you were incredibly helpful. I mean, I spent a week, 10 days in Indianapolis. You took me to American State Insurance Company. You took me up to meet some independent agents on the way to Chicago. So again, you were again a great help in that particular time.
Well, thank you.
But when I came back from the United States, I think the key thing that stuck in my mind above everything was Geico. The Geico model. I went to Washington twice. I spent 2 weeks in Washington, and I just loved their model. I loved the removing of the cost duplication, which again is a big thing in the McKinsey report at the moment, about how you take the cost down by doing all the control yourselves. And this whole point of control, I mean, the control over the marketing, so you can control the media, the offer, the creative, the product features, the incentives for response and conversion, all these things. Retention, again, you can segment, you can find what's the best time of day people like me being contacted regarding retention or special offers, and basically I really wanted to create my own Geico. So I came back to UK and thought, I'm going to have my own Geico. And George, that took me so long. It just took me so long to convince people, but eventually I did, and I had a company called Prospero Direct, which was completely based on Geico.
Wow.
And looking how that started, I could convince nobody in the UK. So I was in Singapore. I lived in Singapore for several years, and I was the chief executive for the Asia Pacific division of a large carrier, which meant I had complete control over channel conflict and different channels. So I thought I would test my my mini Geico in Singapore, which I did. And again, people said that Chinese people don't like to deal direct. They like to negotiate, they like face-to-face. Hey, George, this just wasn't true at all. It worked completely in Singapore. But what it gave me is when I went back to UK, so I'm back in the UK in the late 80s. Now I've got a success story in Singapore. So at that particular time, it's much more easy to get people to help me and fund it, which is what I did. And so Prospero was then launched, a blank sheet of paper. I created every aspect. It was all the things I'd learned from the trip to USA, and particularly Geico, and again, the completely integrated systems. And I turned, when looking at the pricing, the product development, the pricing, I'd found out that in New York, there was the senior consulting actuary of E&Y, was a guy called Chuck Bryan. And so I thought, because he'd worked at USAA as their senior actuary, I got him to come over to the UK and help me. And he brought along a senior underwriter who'd retired, a guy called Bob Brakey, who'd retired from San Antonio. So I had these two USAA people actually helping me create the product development, the pricing side, and see how they fit into the system. So it launched, it really was successful, and then the holding company was sold to AXA, and Prospero then became AXA Direct.
Is AXA Direct still in existence?
It's still in existence now. It's still in existence now.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it was good. Anyway, the next thing that happened is, I mean, looking at the UK, in the mid to late 80s, the auto market was completely controlled for independent agents, but then in the mid to late 80s, direct writing companies such as Prospero Direct were set up, and every single one was a kind of mini Geico. There were all these, about 5 or 6 mini Geicos. How many of those have been in Washington, I don't know, but completely set up on Geico. And the most successful was a Direct Line, which grew to be the biggest auto insurer by a long way in the UK. But a few of them were set up by carriers who dealt through independent agents, but they had a bit of a channel conflict because they couldn't give the dedicated standalone pricing to the direct division. But they're all really successful, so much so, by the early 2000s, 50% of the market, in fact, was dealing direct, which I think in the USA, George, I think Geico is, I don't know, maybe a 20% market share at the moment.
Oh, I'm not quite sure the market share for auto and all that, because State Farm is still by largest by a long shot, but Geico has got a heck of a good share and getting bigger.
Yeah, so these were 50%. But the next thing I did after that is then this occurred to me, and this was in the late 1990s when I'd sold Premier Line. I was thinking, what am I going to do next? Prosper, what am I going to do next? And then what I did think of is that one called Premier Line. What Premier Line was basically taking the Geico theory and applying it to commercial insurance as much as it can be applied to home insurance. I thought, well, if auto, homeowners, medical, all those can be commoditized and sold direct, why can't commercial? Why can't commercial auto? Most people were skeptical. They didn't think I could do it. But by then I had a track record. I created Prospero Direct. I had the track record, and at that stage I found it, quite easy. Plus I got quite a bit of cash myself to invest in it, and Premier Line Direct was launched as the first direct insurance writer of commercial and commercial auto in the UK.
Who were the investors? Just a lot of VCs, or what? Who were the investors?
Well, Premier Line Direct. 75% of it was my own money, because I'd made money from Prospero,
right?
Which then got sold, but then was sold to AXA. What I then took is I took the cash, and I'd learned at that stage. I was a minority shareholder in Prospero, but I then learned that the money men, the guys who control the shares, these are the key guys who decide the future of the company,
right.
When it can be sold, when it can be merged. So I thought the next one I'm going to control it. So 75% of the shares were mine, but I had 100% voting control, because in the 25%, part of my deal is, well, you have to follow my journey. We're going to sell it when I want to sell it, not when you want to sell it. So 25% came up, but put the cash in as well. So I had voting control on that. So that was good. So Premier Line Direct was launched. It's still going today. It's successful. And what happened is, again, it was just commoditizing package. So I read in the McKinsey report, they said they believe that commoditizing commercial is more difficult. Well, it's not more difficult. It just, George, is more time-consuming, because you must create all different modules for all different products, which is what I did. So I had offices, retailers, hotels, restaurants. I even, in 1 year, I had 8% of the whole UK hub market. So
wow.
it grew incredibly quickly. Insured about thousands of hotels. It really grew incredibly quickly. The marketing was done through, again, telemarketing, outbound telemarketing. What I did at the start, George, I basically bought the data on hundreds of thousands of businesses, took them to South Africa, took some out to East Europe, to the Czech Republic, and we telephoned. And when we telephoned, we basically had three questions. We said to them, first of all, do you buy your home insurance or your auto insurance direct? And of course, many said yes. And then the next question is, well, did you know you're shortly going to be able to buy your commercial insurance direct? And if they then were interested in talking more, we would say, would you like a quotation at renewal days? If so, please give us your renewal date. Please give us what time of the day you want telephoning. We'll ring you back whenever you want to, just before the renewal date. So, and we found 20% of all these people were actually saying, yes, give us a quotation. It didn't mean they'll become customers, but it kind of showed that there was an interest in doing commercial direct. So we had affinity groups. We got two major UK banks, which we white labeled for. And again, 40% of the production came from internet, with a very strong pay-per-click and search engine optimization presence. One of the issues we did come across, which I'm sure will arise also in the United States, is the fact that many people would come to us for a quotation, so the businesses would ring up for quotation, but then we'd never hear from them again. And these we found were people who were paying over $5,000 premium. So what we did, we then did market research and as to why they didn't come back. And what transpired is what they were using us for is just to get a price. And they would then take that premium and they would go to the independent agent and say, look, this direct marketing company, who I've never heard of before, I've never met them, they don't know me, they've quoted $10,000, you've quoted $15,000 renewal, so if I'm going to stay with you, you've got to shave your rates. And so the independent agent would then go back to the carrier and the rates would then come down. So I mean, that was something. I mean, how I would deal with that now is when you sell a company, George, and you leave it, you look back months later and think, what would I have done differently? Well, I think what I would have done differently is I would have had an exclusive agency team in the big metro centres, the big cities. I'd have that, and then out in the country, I would have actually sold the leads on to independent agents. So I would have either followed them up myself with exclusive agents, or I would have got value out of them by selling them to independent agents, because they were no use to me because I couldn't convert them.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Anyway, at the end of that, George, I sold it. So I ran it for about 5 years, and then sold it to Allianz, the mighty Allianz.
Oh, big time.
In 2006, and that was it. Premier Line had then gone.
Wow.
Which was great, and it was a great emotional experience for me, because it was creating something which was absolutely brand new that nobody had done. Whereas the first one, Prospero, I'd basically taken Geico and thought, I'm going to bring Geico into the UK. Whereas Premier Line was something nobody had done in the UK before. The next model in the UK came up in the early 2000s on the auto and homeowner side, and this was an aggregator price comparison. Well, what this would do, this would be an aggregator of the four major ones, and they would have the rates of all the major carriers, and I mean hundreds of rates of major carriers on their system. And then when they advertise heavily on television, all four of these spend about $50 million a year on television. They all would advertise on television, and then people would then ring them up or go on the web, and then they would come up with they put the details in at the cheapest rate. And for that they would pay $75 to the aggregator. So it would be a one-time cost of $75. So if the premium is $1,500, it means you're paying a one-time acquisition cost of 5%. But just to show you some of these, George, I mean, what I've done here, Melissa, my colleague in the office, she actually put her details into one of the money supermarket, the biggest aggregator, and it came up with all these quotations. So you can see the left-hand side of the page, it has the name of companies, and alongside those it has the average, it has the premium that she would have to pay. Now, because it's the cheapest, it doesn't mean she'd choose it. You know, if Melissa had heard that top company LV had bad claim service in the press, she wouldn't go with them. She'd have gone further down the line and picked one out later on that. So, I mean, just showing you that one in some detail is, if we take what Melissa would put in, she actually would have put in the details. She'd have put in which one had comprehensive cover. She'd have put her age, so she wanted to pay annually. Yes, she'd put in. She wants a deductible of about $300 US. That comes up with a premium of £434, about $700. And then it gives her things she could pay. If she wants a courtesy car, if she wants breakdown cover, if she wants legal expenses, she would have to pay extra. And then if she liked that, Melissa would then go to the site and complete on the web, or she would click to call direct with the carrier. So that has been, you know, hugely successful. And I think next what I have got, George, just to show you, there's four big ones in UK. There's Money Supermarket, and as you can see from the top, they actually do home insurance. They do a variety of different covers: home insurance, money, energy, mobile phones. So it's not just insurance. And then the next one I've got down to look at is one called Confused. And Confused mentions they've got 138 carriers providing auto cover. So when you put your details in, it checks you against 138 different carriers to pick out the one which would give the best deal for you. And on homeowners insurance, it would be the best 82. So again, it's a mega market to look at. Then the next one is one called Compare the Market. What's quite funny on this, and this shows how much we've all been affected by Geico, is that it's called Compare the Market, but they have a massive successful advertising campaign around a meerkat. They call it Compare the Meerkat. And you've got the meerkat is actually on the site. And if you think about this, George, this is pretty well similar to Geico with the gecko that Geico uses. And this meerkat, it has about 500,000 followers on Twitter. It's just an incredibly successful meerkat which goes back into compare the markets.
Well, they're humanizing the whole thing, and I think that's terrific. I thought that was your picture over there to the right at first, but anyhow, Barrie,
yeah, thanks, George.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, George. Thank you, George.
Yeah. Oh, there's another one. Excuse me. I was going to say that our listeners should know that before we made this, in a long time before, that you suggested that I go to go online to all the companies and see what kind of response we get, which I did. It drove me crazy, incidentally, and they're still after me after all this time. But boy, we both learned a lot of what is actually going on in the United States. But go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Well, I mean, that's the fourth one, George. Compare the market. Another one, compare the market, which again has 120 auto insurance carriers and 83 home insurance carriers. So they're obviously all big and all dealing with a large part of the market. So the benefits to the consumer, the benefits for Melissa when she went in, is that she puts her details in once, and that then approaches 138 insurance companies and comes up with the best deal for Melissa, which is good. And this is great for a new insurance company coming into the market, because I've got a friend, this friend of mine he's an actuary. He created what is now UK's largest telematics company, and he spent no money at all on brand whatsoever or marketing. All he's done is, it's called Insure the Box. It's about a box, a telematics box in the car. It's called Insure the Box. And what he's done, he's gone to the large money supermarket, compare the market, the aggregators, and he pays $75 per client. So again, average premium, I mean, it's so cheap. Average premium $1,500. It's a 5% one-time charge. Yeah. Incredible.
Beautiful.
Incredible, yeah. So that's and how successful it is. Well, 27% of the UK auto market now goes via aggregators, and that's growing all the time. And 73% is divided between the direct writers and the independent agent carriers. I mean, there's no exclusive agents in the UK. It's either direct writers or independent agent system. And it's probably split 50-50 between the two of them. So it's maybe about 35% each on that. So it's they're growing quickly. So what will the next stage be? The next stage, the success of the aggregator model, could lead to more. And already ones are being set up that specialize in motorcycle insurance, that specialize in commercial vehicle insurance. Other ones are being set up. But of course, if too many are set up, that again would make it time consuming, because people would have to put in the details into different, rather than going to one aggregator, you might end up saying, well, maybe I need to go into 3 or 4 aggregators, which would defeat the objective in some way.
Yeah, got it.
So that's that is where the aggregators have gone in UK, and I just wonder at some stage whether there will be an aggregator of aggregators run by somebody such as Google. Obviously, Google believes it owns the world, and George, Google might own the world. I don't know.
I think it may do too. Yeah. Well, what do you think is this scares me? What do you see in the future for this? What do you see us doing in the States here?
Well, what I would see happening in the States basically is, the first thing is, I'm absolutely amazed that here we sit now in 2013, and this McKinsey report comes out in Commoditization now, because even in the 1970s, I remember Dick Stevick at Safeco telling me we need to do something about this billing system when we're both dealing with accounts, the independent agent and the carrier. So I'm surprised it's taken so long. And that leads me to say I fully agree with the McKinsey report, which I predict, like McKinsey, that commoditization will now accelerate, because it does have so many benefits for the again for the carriers in particular. I think aggregators could develop in USA. I mean, as you mentioned, there are lead generation models, and I managed to persuade you to apply to some just to check and see.
Oh boy!
So we do know, George, they're alive and kicking. I also know that one UK aggregator is interested in looking at the United States as well as that. But I also believe that small commercial and commercial auto could become commoditized as well, but again, at a much, much slower pace. And again, I can see the Geico. I wrote to Geico about 5 or 6 years ago. I was coming to USA and said, why don't you go into commercial auto? Why don't you go into small commercial in a big way? And at that time, they told me that wasn't their plans. But hey, George, it could become their plans going forward. If somebody with Geico's cash and Geico's marketing expertise gets involved in that market, that again will stir it up even more.
Oh, Barry, I totally agree with you, and you know darn well those things are going to come. I want to know how people, this is good, I'm glad you brought that up, that how they can contact you. What you've done on this Wells Sports Foundation, I couldn't give it enough, we didn't have enough time to really tell people about it. If you want to see something really neat, go to that wellsportsfoundation.org, and that is really, really amazing. And I think what's so amazing about it is that you worked your can off for all these years and you developed these wonderful ideas. They made money. You were smart enough to take your money and run, and yet you're not quit because you're too young and you're still going out there and spending your time. And I think you have investments around the world, and I really, really admire what you've done. Now, if you can contact Barry there if you want at any time, and he's very responsive. I can promise you that. If you have any questions, feel free, and I hope that I'm going to see Barry and soon, I hope, one of these days, and his wife Heather, his friend, and we're going to keep on talking. In the meantime, go back to your to your email program from that email that came to you today and delivered this mini webinar. And make sure you can go to the archive there. You can just click on Rough Notes there. They have a beautiful archive right on the front of there. When I say archive, all this and a lot of others, all the other ones we've done on the mini webinars, and as we do every week, and have that sent. Look at it anytime you want to, or tell your friends, or tell your people, your staff members. I think every staff member really ought to know this. This is very, very fascinating. You also see the Insurance Community Center on there with their daily or weekly quiz flash, and the Agents of America has the Errors and Omissions program each week, and a new one. Barry, let me thank you again for a fantastic job, and you can say anything you want on the way out here. How's that?
George, okay, George, you're not much to look at, George, but your heart's in the right place and you're a bright guy.